I'm Annie Fitzsimmons. I'm your Washington REALTORS Legal Hotline lawyer. And today's one-on-one video is another opportunity for you to hear from
Pili Meyer.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
And we are continuing our discussion of the buyer agency agreement.
Right.
Last week we talked about the advantages that use of the buyer agency agreement can bring to a broker who's not afraid of using it, wouldn't you say?
Yes.
Okay, because there is certainly a fear factor associated with using it.
That's right.
All right. Today, I want to talk about three things. I want to share with brokers the evolution in our industry with respect to both agency and compensation that leads us to a point today where I would say it's essential for brokers to start using
I agree.
the buyer agency agreement. And then I would like for you to introduce in theory or philosophy, if you will, what advantages or how you utilize the buyer agency agreement to establish the relationship with the buyer that you think is critical.
Okay.
And then in the next video, we're going to let you show us how you do that through a role play, okay?
Okay.
Okay, so first with respect to evolution. Pre-1997, within our industry, every broker represented the seller in every transaction. And in 1997, the agency law came into effect and introduced this new concept in Washington State, where a real estate broker could represent the buyer exclusively, still could represent the seller exclusively, or a broker could be a dual agent. Let's focusing only on exclusive representation of either the seller or the buyer, and specifically the buyer. We saw the industry for the first time ever introduce the notion of buyer agency, and along with that came the buyer agency agreement, what we now refer to as Form 41A.
Right.
And from 1997 until, I would say, a few years ago or months ago, maybe even a few days ago, the buyer agency agreement was a good tool to use, but not an essential tool, unless you were going to be a dual agent, in which case it was an essential tool because you had to use a buyer agency agreement to create that dual agency relationship, right?
Right.
But if you were going to just represent the buyer alone, then the agency law says that every broker in every transaction represents the buyer unless the broker has a written agency agreement with the seller. So the default is to buyer agency, so a broker could represent the buyer in a transaction exclusively, even if they didn't have a buyer agency agreement.
Right.
And all along, the expectation was that, because this is just the way it happened, that sellers paid selling office compensation. And so while the buyer agency agreement includes a provision for compensation, the expectation on behalf of buyers and buyer brokers was that buyer agents' compensation would be paid by the seller, right?
Right.
And we're seeing an evolution again in our industry, this time not associated with agency, but associated with compensation. And we're coming to a place in our industry where it's entirely conceivable that a seller will not pay any compensation at all to a selling office, or less compensation than a buyer broker or buyer's firm believes the buyer broker or firm should be paid or has earned.
Or different from the fee that they charge. Because it's not necessarily just what I think I should be paid or what I think I've earned, but I have a fee that I've determined, my office has determined, I will be paid.
Okay, well said. And so because of that evolution in the industry, we've come to a place where using a buyer agency agreement, although it's still not a requirement of law, I would classify it as essential.
I agree.
We have evolved as an industry from a place where using a buyer agency agreement was a good idea to a place where buyer brokers, you better figure out how you're going to use a buyer agency agreement because it's now become essential that you do so. Right?
Yes.
Okay. So with that introduction, Pili, tell us, please, how you use the buyer agency agreement to actually establish a relationship with the buyer.
Great. Thank you. We've called this a people business for years, and yet it seems to me that sometimes we're trying to take the people relationship out of it.
I've heard it referred to as a relationships business.
In fact, there was a rookie in our office, and I asked him one day how he was enjoying the business, and he said it would be great if it weren't for the people. No, he didn't last. So being able to relate to people, to understand people, to work with people is an essential part of success in the real estate business. You really have to be able to connect and to understand and to communicate effectively with people. And I see that the initial buyer consulting interview is an opportunity to establish your skill at communicating with the buyer, at trying to get them to tell you what it is they want, to make it a safe environment for them. I like to say, by virtue of us having this conversation, I represent you. You mentioned the default position.
Right.
Therefore, everything we're talking about is confidential. So you don't have to worry that I'm going to talk about this with other people. It stays here. And that seemed to open the door to having them talk about some of their private thoughts about what they wanted to do and the real estate solution to their I don't mean to belittle it, to their life situation. You know, they needed a change of some sort. So
you don't meet with somebody and say, "Hi, I'm Pili Meyer. Here's a buyer agency agreement. You need to sign this before we can talk further."
No. If I went anywhere, and we talked earlier, if I went out to dinner and the server came up and said, "Here's the bill," and I haven't even seen a menu, I don't even know if I really want to stay there, I would leave. Because I don't know what you're offering me, and I don't know how you're going to serve me or anything like that. So in this initial counseling interview, it's my opportunity to learn more about them and then show them how I am going to help them get what they want.
To learn more about them and also to introduce yourself to them, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So tell me about learning more about them. What exactly are you talking about there? You want to know how many kids they have, what kind of pets they have? What do you want to know about them? What's their favorite color?
No, I really don't actually ask them about color. I want to know what it is they're looking for. Why are you making a move? What's going on with you that you want to make this move? And if you ask a simple question and then be quiet, it's amazing what you hear in answer. And I sometimes think that it's a confessional. I mean, I have heard life stories that I don't repeat. First of all, it's confidential, but secondly, they're not my stories to tell. Mm-hmm. And people will tell you a lot of interesting things and private things and heartfelt things if they know you're really going to listen. And so you have to listen. Sometimes I will say, do you mind if I take a couple of notes, because I'm getting so much that I need to, and the memory. I remember when I had one, yeah. So you just have to take a few notes. But that's what I'm trying to do, is create a safe environment where they can share with me what they want to, where they are, what they want to buy, and why they want to buy it.
Okay. In this same conversation, do you have any expectations of them?
Yes, I do. And once we've gone through that, and I've talked about how I can help them, this is what I can do, then I have to give them something to do. I have to give them some way, besides before we get to compensation, some way of a quid pro quo here. Because if you say, here are all my services.
Wait a minute, we haven't even talked about that yet.
What?
What we've talked about so far is you getting to know them.
Yeah.
So before you tell them what you expect from them, you're going to tell them what services you're going to bring them.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's go back to that part.
Okay.
Then. So you've gotten to know them a little bit. Now I guess you're going to introduce yourself then somewhat. Is that it?
Yes.
For your services?
Yes. And this is how I do business, and these are the things that I offer my clients, and this is why I do this.
Okay.
Because I want you to be an informed buyer, that you will be comfortable when you come down to making the decisions about actually buying a particular home.
Okay.
And so these are different services that I offer.
Okay, so like in the last video, you had referenced that whenever possible, you're going to present the buyer's offer.
In
you had
person,
said.
yep.
In person, right. So some of the services that you would bring a buyer, do you talk about sending them listings? Do you talk about driving them around to houses? Being available
sure,
if they see something at
sure.
an open house? What kind of things?
I explain my hours, so to speak, which of course are flexible, and that I will do a market analysis on the house they're going to write the offer on, explaining to them, when we're looking at houses, we're doing a walking market analysis. You're comparing all the homes that are available. But once we find the one you want to buy, then we'll look at what has sold and see what kinds of decisions similar sellers have made.
Okay.
So that you'll know how to fit into that mix. So you'll be comfortable with the decisions you make.
Okay. Okay. So you get to know them, describe the services you're going to provide to them, and then we move on to what you expect from them.
Right. Because if you don't say, and as a result of that, I expect you to do, they will be uncomfortable. They know that there's something they'll have to do. And if you don't say something, it doesn't have to be a whole lot, but you have to say something at this point. Otherwise, they'll always be waiting for that other shoe to drop when you say, oh, and by the way. So I tell them up front, get pre-approved and get through underwriting. And also, I expect you to work exclusively with me. If I'm going to provide you with these services, then I expect that we'll have an exclusive relationship and we'll have a written agreement. And for me, that's it. Other people have other expectations. I've heard people say, and that you will be loyal to me. Well, I think that's what the exclusive agreement is.
Okay.
And because of your market, you may have something else that you want to put in there, and that's fine. But what's critical is having something they have to do in response to what you're offering them.
Okay. All right. Like a little task list for themselves. Here's your list of the services you're going to bring. Buyer, here's your list of duties between now and next time we meet? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
We might do a courtesy tour today, but before we go out again, I want you to go to a lender and get pre-approved.
Okay. All right. So when do you get the signature on the bottom line then?
We talk about how I get paid, and then it's time to go to the bottom line. And after we've had all this discussion, I'll say something along the lines of, there's a lot of paperwork in this business, so let's get started. And I like the action of that. It's like firing the gun. Let's go. And also, what I really love about asking them to sign a buyer's agreement is that occasionally you're going to learn the one thing they didn't tell you, even though you asked the question. For instance, that somebody else is going to write any offer they write. Or, well, I looked at a house yesterday that I'm really interested in buying. We made an offer on it last night, but I just wanted to reconfirm today by going and looking at this other house. So then I have choices to make. I'm sorry, I don't work under those circumstances. You already have an agent. Let them show you that house.
Okay.
Or I could show, if maybe I need to see that house myself. Let's go look at it, but I'm going to be real clear that this is it. That's all I'm doing for you.
Well, and why are you in my office today if you looked at a house
With somebody else yesterday.
yesterday?
Well, they weren't available. That's the usual answer. And, we do not have any patience in our culture. They can't wait till the person's available. So,
I've heard it described as an Amazon culture. We want
oh,
2-day delivery or...
I used to say microwave, but Amazon's better. At any rate, that's one of the best reasons to use a buyer's agreement, is that zero moment of truth when you ask them to sign it. And you learn a lot at that point.
Okay. All right. Anything else we need to know today before you start the role play?
I think we're good.
Okay. So you'll meet me back here next Friday, and we'll do a little role play?
Yeah. And evidently we wear the same wardrobe every Friday.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of diversity in our wardrobe when it
No.
comes to discussing. This is my buyer agency agreement. I don't know about you, but maybe
okay,
that's
yeah.
your buyer agency agreement.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. So, between now and next Friday, if you have questions on the buyer agency agreement or any topic at all, send an email to me, legalhotline@warealtor.org. Thank you for being a Washington REALTORS member.